What would you do if the person you loved most betrayed you in the worst way possible? Meet Bobby Mason, a tech expert who thought his marriage with Carol was built on trust. But when a simple lunch with friends turns into an emotional confrontation, Bobby uncovers a truth that no one could have prepared for. The shocking twist: he finds out that Carol has been lying to him for months. Now, Bobby has to unravel the mystery using the very skills that made him a cybersecurity pro, skills that lead him to a painful discovery that will change his life forever. It's a typical lunch at a local cafe with Bobby Mason and his closest friends, a chance to catch up and laugh after a hectic week. But as Ralph Germain casually mentions something about Carol's recent visit to the Metro Hotel, Bobby's world is thrown into chaos. "I saw her there a couple of weeks ago. She seemed to be with someone else. Is everything okay?" Ralph's words echo in Bobby's ears like a distant thunderclap, and the moment they land, Bobby feels his breath catch in his throat. Carol had told him she was in Texas visiting her mother, but this new information doesn't add up. Bobby forces a smile, trying to brush it off as a mistake, but deep down, something stirs in him. The seed of doubt has been planted, and despite trying to ignore it, Bobby can't escape the sick feeling gnawing at him. The man who has always prided himself on being logical and level-headed now finds himself spiraling into confusion and disbelief. Bobby excuses himself, desperately trying to regain his composure. He stumbles to the restroom, trying to make sense of Ralph's words. Could there be a reasonable explanation for this? Or has his wife, the woman he thought he knew so well, been hiding something from him? The question swirls in his mind as his thoughts race uncontrollably. He returns to his friends, his mind in a haze, and they immediately notice the shift in his mood. The man who was once confident and self-assured is now a mere shadow of himself, trapped in a web of uncertainty. This is where Bobby's journey truly begins, a journey filled with pain, betrayal, and the unraveling of everything he thought he knew about love and trust. The restroom door clicks shut behind Bobby, but the space inside feels smaller than it should. His chest tightens, his heart racing as Ralph's words replay in his head, louder each time. He leans against the sink, gripping the edge, trying to steady himself. His reflection in the mirror seems foreign. This isn't the same man who walked into the cafe just minutes ago. This man is shattered. His mind, usually so sharp and precise, is now clouded by a storm of doubt and betrayal. How did it come to this? How had everything he thought was solid and unbreakable become so fragile? Carol had been his world, the woman he married, the woman he trusted with his heart, his future. And now, with a single question, Ralph had shattered that trust, leaving him standing on the precipice of a nightmare he never saw coming. Bobby's breaths grow shallow as the emotional weight of the situation presses down on him. He feels a lump form in his throat as the tears well up in his eyes. He hadn't expected to break down like this, not in public, not in front of his friends. But the floodgates are open, and there's no stopping it. The disbelief, the anger, the hurt, everything crashes over him at once, and all he can do is lean against the cold porcelain sink, letting the tears fall. When Bobby finally returns to the table, his friends see it in his eyes. They can't help but notice the change in him. He tries to force a smile, to act as if everything is fine, but it's impossible to hide what's going on inside. His mind is no longer present in the conversation. All he can think about is Carol, the woman who may have betrayed him in the worst possible way. His thoughts are consumed by the weight of this revelation, and he knows, deep down, that he needs answers. But how does a man like Bobby, a man who relies on logic and reason, even begin to search for the truth when his heart is breaking? Bobby Mason is a man who prides himself on his work ethic, precision, and expertise in the world of cybersecurity. His mind is sharp, his focus unwavering. He partners in a successful tech company, where he is known for his impeccable problem-solving skills and his ability to handle the most complex computer security breaches. His friends and colleagues respect him not only for his intellect but also for his loyalty and reliability. When it comes to his job, Bobby is a rock, a man who thrives under pressure and always finds a way to fix what's broken. But here's the thing: Bobby is more than just a tech expert. He's a man who deeply values trust, integrity, and stability. In a world of ones and zeros, where data is everything, Bobby had always believed that the human connections in his life, especially with Carol, were as solid as the firewall he built to protect his clients. At lunch, as he talks with his friends about their latest business ventures and reminisces about their university days, Bobby's easy confidence is on full display. He recounts his professional journey, from his early days working with firewalls and malware removal to now owning a stake in a successful cybersecurity firm. He mentions his team of lifelong friends, the people he trusts, and how they've built something together from the ground up. But amidst this conversation, Bobby can't help but notice the gnawing discomfort in the pit of his stomach. It's the same feeling he gets when a virus slips past his security measures. He's always been able to track down the source of a problem, but now in his personal life he feels helpless. Despite all his expertise in the digital world, Bobby realizes that he is powerless when it comes to understanding what's happening with Carol. The confidence he once had in his ability to fix things is fading fast. His career may be thriving, but his marriage? It's hanging by a thread. Before the tech empire, before the successful career, before the betrayal, there was Carol. Bobby first met her in a way that seemed almost destined. It was a routine job at her workplace, a simple virus removal. Carol, the office manager, had called him in to deal with a particularly nasty virus that had infiltrated the company's network. Bobby, ever the professional, had arrived with his tools, his laptop, and his sharp focus. It was just another job in a long list of many, but there was something about Carol that caught his attention. She was smart, efficient, and calm under pressure, qualities that Bobby admired. As he worked on her company's computers, they talked. At first it was all business, but soon the conversation shifted to more personal topics. They laughed, shared stories, and before Bobby knew it, he found himself drawn to her warmth and her intelligence. Carol had a quiet confidence, an easy charm that made Bobby feel comfortable in a way no one else had before. The spark was instant, and what started as professional interaction soon blossomed into something more. Bobby found himself looking forward to the days when he'd get called in to handle problems at her office, not because of the work itself, but because of the time he'd get to spend with Carol. They went on dates, spent hours talking, and gradually became inseparable. But as much as their connection felt perfect, it was far from it. Carol's family didn't approve of Bobby. Her father, in particular, thought Bobby was too rough around the edges and not good enough for their daughter. Carol's mother, Stella, had always kept a watchful eye on their relationship, casting judgment from the sidelines. But Carol was determined. She loved Bobby, and she was willing to defy her family to be with him. That moment when she declared her love for him at the airport in front of her mother, boldly choosing Bobby over family expectations, was a pivotal moment for them. It was a declaration of independence, and in that moment, Bobby knew he had found someone who would fight for their love, no matter the cost. But now, as Bobby stands on the precipice of a devastating betrayal, he wonders, was Carol truly the woman he thought she was? Or had he missed something along the way, blinded by love? The past seems both beautiful and painful as Bobby realizes that everything he thought he knew about his wife might have been a lie. 3 years into their marriage, Bobby thought he knew exactly who Carol was. Their relationship had been built on a foundation of shared dreams and mutual support. But there was one defining moment that changed everything, a moment that Bobby would look back on with a mix of pride and regret. It happened at the airport, right before Carol was supposed to leave for a trip to visit her mother in Texas. The tension between Carol and her family had always been there, especially with her mother, Stella. Stella was the type of woman who controlled everything from Carol's career choices to her relationships. It wasn't uncommon for Carol to feel like she was living in the shadow of her mother's expectations. But that day at the airport, something shifted. As Carol stood with Bobby in the bustling terminal, ready to leave, her mother approached them with that familiar disapproving look in her eyes. It was clear from the moment Stella opened her mouth that she was questioning Carol's decision to spend time with Bobby over her family. In front of everyone, Carol stood tall. She looked at Bobby with fierce determination, as if she was silently telling him, "I choose you." She turned to her mother and said, "I'm married, Mom. Bobby is my family now." It was the first time Bobby saw Carol truly take a stand. Her mother's disapproval no longer had the power to dictate her choices, and Bobby felt a rush of pride in that moment. But what Bobby didn't know was that Carol's defiance that day was only a small preview of what was to come. It wasn't just her mother's control she was breaking free from, it was the relationship itself. What Bobby had seen as a bold statement of independence now feels like a distant, naive memory. How could he have known then that the woman who declared her loyalty to him would soon betray that very trust? As the years went on, Bobby and Carol's bond was tested in ways they hadn't anticipated. One of their most challenging struggles came when they tried to start a family. Bobby had always dreamed of being a father, of having children to share his life with. And Carol, ever supportive, was eager to build that future with him. But life had other plans. After several attempts to conceive, it became clear that something was wrong. Bobby, who had always prided himself on being in control of every situation, found himself at a loss. Doctors delivered the news the issue was on his side. His body wasn't capable of producing viable sperm, and it was something he had no control over. The weight of this revelation crushed Bobby. The dreams of fatherhood, of building a family, now felt like an impossible goal. Carol, always supportive, assured him they would figure things out. But despite her words, Bobby could see the disappointment in her eyes. He knew that Carol, too, had dreams of motherhood, and the strain of this issue began to create an unspoken tension between them. In the midst of this, Bobby's professional life continued to flourish. But at home, the pressure of their medical struggles started to fray their relationship. Carol's patience seemed to wear thin, and Bobby couldn't shake the feeling that her disappointment had begun to manifest in other ways. The intimacy they once shared started to fade, and Bobby became more and more consumed by his own guilt. What kind of husband was he if he couldn't give Carol the one thing she wanted most? Their strained efforts to conceive and the growing sense of helplessness in Bobby's heart were compounded by the ever-present tension with Carol's mother, Stella. In Bobby's mind, it all began to feel like a series of insurmountable obstacles that no one, not even his skills as a tech expert, could fix. But the cracks in their relationship were widening, and it seemed that no matter how much Bobby tried, the distance between him and Carol was only growing. As Bobby sat with these thoughts, reflecting on how far they had fallen from the couple they once were, he couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play, something he hadn't yet uncovered. The quiet hum of Bobby's everyday life was interrupted when he received the news that Stella, Carol's mother, had suffered a small stroke. At first, the doctors reassured them that it wasn't as severe as it could have been, but the incident was enough to shake the Mason family to its core. Bobby had never been particularly close to Stella, but the woman was a significant presence in Carol's life, and her health crisis would have a profound impact on their relationship. Carol became increasingly absorbed in caring for her mother. She spent hours at Stella's bedside, tending to her every need, ensuring her recovery was as smooth as possible. Bobby, despite his initial reservations about Stella, tried to support Carol during this difficult time, offering to help out whenever he could. But soon, the strains of balancing caregiving responsibilities with their own emotional turmoil became too much to bear. Bobby was already dealing with the overwhelming grief of their struggles to start a family, and now he had to witness Carol's shifting priorities. What Bobby couldn't ignore, however, was the growing distance between them. Carol was physically present, but emotionally she seemed to be somewhere else, engrossed in her mother's recovery and the weight of her family obligations. The tension between Bobby and Carol became palpable. She was tired, stretched thin, and the warmth that once defined their relationship was slowly evaporating. Despite Bobby's attempts to be understanding, the long hours Carol spent at her mother's house, the constant phone calls, and the emotional strain created a wall between them. Bobby, who had already felt the sting of their infertility struggles, now faced another painful reality. His wife's loyalty seemed to be divided. She was no longer just struggling with their future together, but now consumed by the needs of her mother. Bobby started feeling invisible, like a shadow of the man he once was in Carol's life. It was as though her family had always come first, and now, with Stella's health crisis, it was more apparent than ever. Bobby's patience was tested, but he tried to be the supportive husband, even though the emotional toll was wearing him down. He could feel the hurt building within him, but he didn't want to add more pressure on Carol. He kept his frustrations to himself, convinced that things would improve once Stella was well again. But as the weeks dragged on, Bobby started to wonder whether Carol would ever be able to truly see him again, whether he could ever regain his place in her life. It was a painful realization, one that would haunt him for much longer than he expected. As the weeks turned into months, Bobby's world grew darker. The strain of trying to understand what had happened to his marriage weighed heavily on him, and the feelings of doubt that had begun with Ralph's comment about the Metro Hotel now intensified. Despite Carol's assurances that nothing was wrong, Bobby couldn't shake the suspicion that something was off. The nagging thought that his wife might be hiding something from him refused to leave his mind. Bobby, a computer security expert by trade, had always been able to track down the truth in the digital world, but in his personal life he had no clue where to start. However, with the emotional weight of his suspicions bearing down on him, he couldn't resist any longer. His natural instinct as a hacker, honed over years of unraveling complex systems, now turned inward, focused on finding the truth about Carol. He started by digging through Carol's email, her social media messages, and even tracking the locations of her phone. He knew it was a breach of trust, but the need for answers was consuming him. The deeper he dug, the more unsettling the truth became. There were suspicious messages, unexplained absences, and instances where Carol had been in places she claimed not to be. But it was the video footage he discovered that truly broke him. Using his tech skills, Bobby was able to access security footage from a nearby hotel where Carol had been spotted on multiple weekends. What he saw left him numb. Carol was there, at the hotel, not alone, but with another man. The footage revealed the extent of her deception. There was no mistaking it. Carol had been unfaithful to him. Bobby stared at the screen in disbelief, his mind racing to process what he was seeing. The woman he loved, the woman he had built a life with, had been lying to him for months. It wasn't just an isolated mistake, it was an ongoing betrayal. His heart shattered as the full weight of her infidelity settled in. The trust he had built his entire marriage on had been completely shattered. In that moment, Bobby knew there was no going back. His wife had betrayed him in the most painful way imaginable, and no amount of digging could undo the damage. The man he had been before, the man who trusted, who loved, was gone. In his place was someone who now had to face the hardest truth of all. The woman he thought he knew had deceived him, and there was no repairing the broken trust. The truth was undeniable now. Bobby had seen the footage, had pieced together the lies, and there was no turning back. His world had come crashing down, and with every new piece of evidence, his heart grew heavier. What had started as suspicion now felt like a painful reality. His wife, Carol, had betrayed him. He had never imagined it would come to this. He had loved her with all his heart, and yet, in the cold light of truth, it was clear that she had been deceiving him for months. With the evidence in front of him, Bobby felt the urge to confront Carol. He couldn't go on living in this lie, and he needed to hear the truth from her own lips. He waited for the right moment, heart pounding with anticipation and dread. When Carol returned home from one of her regular visits to her mother, Bobby didn't waste any time. He called her into the living room, his voice steady but filled with an undeniable pain. "We need to talk," he said, his words sharp and final. Carol, clearly unsuspecting of the storm that was about to hit, sat down next to him, her usual smile faltering as she sensed the tension in the room. Bobby didn't waste any time with pleasantries. "Why, Carol, why have you been lying to me? Why have you been with someone else?" His voice cracked, and the weight of his words hung heavy in the air. For a long moment, Carol sat in stunned silence, her face a mask of disbelief. She had always been the one to control the narrative, to shape their relationship on her terms. But now, with the truth laid bare before her, she had nowhere to hide. Her eyes darted to the floor, unable to meet Bobby's gaze. I didn't mean for it to happen," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. It just, It just did. Bobby's anger flared. Don't give me that. I've seen the videos. I've seen the messages. You didn't accidentally go to that hotel. You didn't accidentally lie to me for months. You made a choice, Carol, and now you've ruined everything. The silence between them was suffocating, a chasm that neither of them knew how to cross. Carol's excuses were weak, her apologies empty. She had nothing left to say that could heal the wound she had inflicted. Bobby felt a cold rage building inside him. He wanted answers, but more than that, he wanted the truth. He had built his life on trust, and now, in one painful moment, it had all been destroyed. As Bobby's emotions swirled, he knew that there was no going back. His marriage, the life they had built together, was shattered. The trust that had once been the foundation of their bond was now a broken mirror, and no matter how hard he tried to piece it together, it would never be the same again. Carol's betrayal wasn't just an affair, it was a rupture in the very fabric of their relationship. And as Bobby stared at her, his heart heavy with hurt and disbelief, he realized he was standing at the crossroads of a painful future. One path would lead to the end of their marriage, and the other. Well, the other was uncertain. But Bobby knew that no matter which way he went, his life would never be the same. In the weeks that followed, Bobby found himself lost in the wreckage of his marriage. He had confronted Carol, and the truth was out. But that didn't make the pain go away. The devastation of betrayal, the agony of watching the woman he loved crumble before him, was something he could never forget. The house felt empty without Carol's presence, and yet, when she was there, it felt suffocating. Bobby moved through the motions of daily life, but nothing felt right. His work, which had always been a source of comfort and pride, couldn't distract him from the emotional chaos that raged inside him. He continued to throw himself into his tech business, diving deeper into projects, solving problems that others couldn't. But no matter how much he buried himself in his work, the pain of Carol's betrayal lingered in the back of his mind. Carol, for her part, seemed to be going through the motions as well. She had apologized more times than Bobby could count, but it was too little, too late. The damage had been done. She had broken his trust in a way that no words could repair. She begged for forgiveness, pleaded for a second chance, but Bobby could no longer see her the way he once had. The image of her with another man, the video evidence he had uncovered, was burned into his mind. It was as though he was looking at a stranger, someone he no longer recognized. As time passed, Bobby began to realize that healing would take time, and that meant facing the reality that his marriage was over. The pain of the betrayal was deep, but Bobby knew he couldn't live in the past. He needed to move forward, even if that meant walking away from everything he had known. In the end, Bobby made the hardest decision of his life. He filed for divorce. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The life he had dreamed of with Carol was gone, and no matter how much he loved her, he knew that it was time to let go. He needed to rebuild his life, to rediscover who he was without the woman who had once been his everything. It wasn't an easy journey, but it was one that would lead Bobby to a place of strength, independence, and ultimately healing. Carol's betrayal had destroyed their marriage, but it had also given Bobby the opportunity to start fresh. And though the road ahead was uncertain, Bobby knew that he was stronger than the pain of the past and that, in time, he would find peace again. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to my channel for more gripping stories like this one. Stay tuned for the next video.